Hello, I'm Maria Hall Brown. Welcome to this edition of Protest and Promise. Well, COVID concerns continue, police policies are debated, schools struggle with decisions, politics are heating up as the election approaches, and the voice of our youth need to be heard. Fortunately, we have a wonderful councilwoman today. Councilwoman Monica Rodriguez from District 7 is here to answer questions from young Angelenos and perhaps offer them some insight. We're delighted to have you with us, Councilwoman.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, let me go around and introduce you to these wonderful young people who are going to ask you some questions. Eduardo, hello. Bridget, hello. And of course, Alondra. Thank you all for being with us today. I'm going to just go ahead and bring up something kind of fun and not necessarily dramatic, but Councilwoman Rodriguez, I want you to know that Eduardo goes to Occidental.
Awesome. Great school.
Yes, it is.
So perhaps you guys can share a little experience. How has your experience been there so far? Eduardo.
It's been great. I've been able to connect a lot with our Spanish department and Diplomacy and World Affairs department, and a lot of good professors and mentors through that program, and then also get involved with the community in Eagle Rock as well. So it's been great.
Great. Any hints or tips
very,
for him while
Very
he's there?
excited about your new president. They have a brand new president at Oxy. I'm very excited. Looking forward to having an opportunity to meet him in person.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's been great in the 2 or 3 weeks that he's been there. He's been really communicative and he's been great.
Yeah.
Well, let's launch right into some important topics. Obviously, youth development and youth awareness and the importance of the youth voice has been something that's a cornerstone to what you feel and believe in. So what would you say is happening in your district right now that might be something that ties into what one of these young people would be interested in?
Well, I think there's a couple of things, and just, I'm excited that Eduardo attends my alma mater, Occidental. We're at a moment in time, much like I was back as a freshman at Oxy. I entered my freshman year on the heels of civil unrest in Los Angeles. It was right after the beating of Rodney King. And so, I find ourselves kind of reliving a moment in history in, with youth activism. And so I think what's I think most exciting for me is it feels like a very just full circle moment where, as someone who was really galvanized by leading change and wanting to be part of the change and identifying leadership in the city of Los Angeles as my area of activism. It gives me great pleasure to join the youth here on this panel, who I think are also equally compelled, just as I was 20 something, 30, almost 30 years ago. And really for me, my job, I really believe strongly in the work that I'm leading with respect to youth development is critical, that their participation is very much a part of it. We're not here to do anything in a vacuum. We need the youth of this city to come together and help rally, and advocate for the resources that are necessary. And as a result of the pandemic, we are seeing youth in this city fall further and further behind, and disproportionately so in communities of color. So I think this is a moment in time that really calls on the youth of our city to become more engaged and more active, and know that they have leaders that are here to be partners with them to help change the face of local government.
When it comes to reform, I know Bridget had a couple questions in that regard.
Most of them having to do with lower income neighborhoods and how they will be affected during police reform.
So right now we are leading a number of efforts that really change the way in which our police officers engage in communities of color, and in particular in lower socioeconomic impacted communities. Our safest and our best public safety outcomes aren't going to be derived by policing efforts alone. It really does require the community to have trust with their public safety officers, to making sure that, we can have a constructive relationship that actually helps to address what the root problems are. But it really is based on fundamental development of trust. And right now, when you have a history of trauma in some of those neighborhoods, it's really difficult to build that level of trust. These community safety partnerships, these officers that are dedicated in these areas, work remarkably well with members of the community to help not only establish that trust, but to actually build out more of the public safety deliverables that everyone wants. They want to feel safe when they're in their neighborhoods, but they want to feel safe without feeling as if they're the target. And this effort has been one where it's dedicated officers to help get them to help have a mutual respect for one another and help achieve a safer neighborhood.
Eduardo, how do you feel about the whole idea of community policing, and what would you want to have factored into those decisions?
I think that, so I grew up in suburban Northern California, rural Northern California. So a lot of the trauma and a lot of that stuff was kind of instilled for me from my mother, who grew up in East LA, right? And I lived it in suburban, rural Northern California when, police officers would look at me differently than my white friends. My white friends would be out past curfew or whatever and would be, let off, whereas I'd have to call my parents and things like this. So for me, that sense of distrust and real trauma, right? Family trauma, historical trauma that has been imposed by the police state is something that's crucial to having a successful community police program, community safety program with community safety officers and things like that. So when it comes to having a successful program, I think that the thing that needs to be stressed most is that there are issues that will have to be dealt with, and we can't just turn a colorblind eye to them. We can't just say that, it's okay, it's in the past. These things still impact generations to come, and they need to be handled and they need to be addressed to move forward.
I know that you had a question in regards to sort of in communities, the gentrification of communities. I know that was something that you wanted to ask the councilwoman.
And exactly. And that's another thing, right? So you worked on the California State Realtor Board, all of this stuff. How do you kind of balance real estate interests with gentrification? So like I said, I go to school in the Eagle Rock Highland Park area at Occidental College, and you see it firsthand, and it's miserable. It's sad. You have people that work at Oxy living, having to move east and further east to the point where they're commuting 2 hours each day just to work an 8-hour shift, right? So how do you balance that, making affordable housing in areas like densely populated like Los Angeles?
So actually, yes, I did spend 10 years working for the California Association of Realtors. It was running their Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So just to put some context on it, it's very much aligned, because I think, making sure that we have workforce housing and that folks don't have to commute extraordinary lengths in order to work in their, people should be able to live and work in the areas that they serve. It's very much aligned with the work that I continue as a member of the city council today. In fact, in the area that I represent, we have long been one of the last areas of affordability in the city of Los Angeles. It's with respect to that that, in fact, I've also taken great efforts to make sure that, when we have really limited numbers of affordability, when you have units that are lost to, say, Airbnb, for example, or folks that are visiting in more desirable, vacationing locations in the city of Los Angeles, what does that do to the housing impacts for areas like mine, when folks can't afford to live in Silver Lake anymore And now they're going to push out families in my neighborhood from being able to afford to stay. So I think it's responsible for all of us in the city of Los Angeles to continue to expand access to affordability. Also making sure that many of the men and women, and I'm you know, I represent an area that I grew up in, which I'm very proud of. Many of my friends, when I was in high school, I remember they said, you know, I can't wait to leave because I want to go move to Santa Clarita or all these other places. And I said, no, if we want to fix some of the challenges that we have in our own neighborhoods, we have to stay and fix it. You can't run from these challenges. I continue to fight to make sure that we're not only just providing access to affordability for housing, but also making sure that those very same individuals have the propensity and the ability through access to quality jobs, but also the ability to buy their first home so that they could start their family here in the Northeast San Fernando Valley as well. That's how you keep and how you retain, as far as I'm concerned, the ability to sustain what the community looks like and preserve the integrity of what that looks like.
Eduardo?
How do you kind of balance that with the lack of trust in government? We talked about that earlier, and there's this very real distrust of public officials, especially in the Los Angeles area. So how do you balance the interests of the people and also, you know, policy or affordable housing and stuff like that in these communities that have historical trauma from the city of Los Angeles itself? So how do you, as a councilwoman, kind of balance that and work with local communities to get things done, really?
Yeah, so for me, it's always been about results. The way you build trust with anyone is, you know, I ran with my father's mantra in mind: actions speak louder than words. And so for me, I've always been about the results and delivering that for my community. I represent an area that in one part of my district, I'm the 4th representative in 10 years. And in the other half of my district, I'm the 5th representative in 10 years. So when you have that lack of continuity, people don't trust their local elected officials. And that's irrespective of all the other circumstances of what we've seen most recently here in Los Angeles. It's, you know, I will say the level of distrust, yes, I agree. We are at probably, I would say, the lowest levels of trust in government right now, sworn, elected, and otherwise.
Right.
And what I do every single day is I do my damnedest to make sure that everything that I do with my actions are reflective of the commitment that I made to serve honorably and represent the community that the communities that I represent with that level of integrity.
Right.
You know, it's really difficult for, you know, we can legislate, you know, the challenge is, as policymakers, everyone expects policymakers to legislate away any illegal activity. But unfortunately, people who willfully determine to engage in illegal activity or things that are ethically immoral, you know, it's hard to, you know, how do you legislate that? We've already made rules that say, listen, you know, you want to be above reproach. Everything that I do is to be above reproach, in that I work with my members of the community to address the problems, to be responsive, to be accountable. And I can only do it by my example. And I work to do that every day. You know, two of the previous members that represented the area had also historically left on not so constructive terms. And it shed a bad light for my community. Right. And I wanted to be part of the change in that. So, you know, it's the old adage, you know, much like Gandhi, you know, be the change you want to see in the world. And the truth is that we have to emulate and behave in a way that elicits that trust from the community. I make no, you know, I don't, I've been in office 3 years now. And when I look at the results of what we've delivered in the district, in fact, today, we just opened up, I was just this morning joining the mayor at our Bridge housing site for 85 beds that are available for women that have been living in homelessness. Done that in under 3 years. There's a great deal of accomplishments that I'm very proud of citing in my in my short tenure as a city council member. And I'm just going to continue to do the work because that's what the job calls for. And I believe it's through that we gain the public's trust.
And along those lines, it's also your constituency and the taxpayer dollars. I know that Alondra had a question in regards to what kind of control taxpayers have.
My question is, when it comes to funding, how can Angelenos advocate where they want their tax money to go? On the federal level, it's hard to negotiate tax money allocation, but can it be done on a state or city level?
Well, and I'm also gonna challenge that. At a federal level, it's not any more difficult than it is on a local level. You guys, we just have to organize, and we have to advocate with your congressional representatives and senators to fight for what we want. I think it's any level of government. Everyone likes it's the city is where you see the most immediate results of the investments in those areas. But oftentimes it's federal resources that could also be an instrumental part of how we actually advance a lot of that work. And so often we don't actually get the same level of advocacy. There's oftentimes where people even message us about doing things that the state is required to do, and they want the city to deal with everything. And I think, to me, that represents a level of trust in local elected officials over some of the state and federal representatives to actually accelerate the progress. And but the reality is that you have representatives at every level. And we need to hold everyone accountable. It's not just one level of government, it's all levels of government, and everyone has a role to play in that. With respect to advocating for the budget, we've had, our budget process this year has been severely impacted by COVID-19, whereas before we would have a great deal of hearings by department to really reflect deeply into each of the expenditures that each department was proposing. Now everything is like we're doing right now is on Zoom. And I think it doesn't lend itself to the same degree of community engagement and participation that it did before. We do have the budget advocates of the neighborhood councils that would often meet with the members of the budget committee. But again, it doesn't stop the emails and the calls that we get. Each of our offices receives about, where they want to see the funding, how they want to see it allocated, what the priorities are. And being a part of that process is a matter of, picking up the phone and communicating. I often say, a lot of people like to complain about their frustrations on social media, but a more constructive way is to actually pick up the phone and have a conversation with the person who represents you or their staff, so that we can get a pulse on what people are eager to see happen. It's you can post it on social media, but the reality is a more constructive way is to have a conversation with someone who actually has the power and the authority to do something about it.
I'm going to ask a question based on that, because it seems very straightforward and simple, but apparently you being in a position of authority, one would think perhaps you don't have the time or the ability to actually get through to you. How many of you have actually called somebody who represents something that is important to you, whether it be a school official, whether it be a governmental official, whether it be somebody that you felt made decisions for your life? Have any of you ever called anyone? Not text, not email, but called. Will you raise your hand? All right, Eduardo, who did you call and what was the response you got, and was it effective and did it teach you something?
Well, in response to, you brought up school, and I've been working closely with administration at Occidental about returning, and we recently decided not to return. And that was obviously a really tough decision. But a lot of the times when we communicate with our school officials, it's difficult, and two, we get the runaround of things are constantly changing. We can't make a decision. We don't know what to do, all these things. So that's something that I've had difficulty with. In terms of local government, congressperson often get, I don't know, just a voicemail or something like that. And something that did surprise me is that one of my county supervisors, I did reach out to him directly, and he did, within hours email me back. And I think that was something that was really good. And obviously my county is 250,000 people, so it's much smaller than Los Angeles. But so yeah, I don't know, mixed results with that.
Interesting.
My district, Eduardo, my district is 250,000 people.
Yeah, that's a big difference.
Each of the 15 council members each represents 250,000. And so, yeah, it does get difficult, but we do have staffs that are oftentimes trying to facilitate getting the very answers and getting, while those of us are either on a Zoom or doing a multitude of different activities, we try to be as responsive as we possibly can.
Well, words are powerful, obviously, and that's something that you've brought up in some of these development programs in your district, how they are named and what they're, but words seem to be even at a broader scale right now with people changing logos, the way someone is called, how someone is entitled, what they're called, how that defines them. Have words had an impact on just a title, had an impact on any of you? What you've been called or what you've seen out there, or how a program is defined based on its title? I know that that's something that seems to be at the forefront of people's attention right now. Trader Joe's is changing some of its logos. How we define what's happening up in Portland is under debate. All that kind of thing. So, have you ever thought about words, Bridget?
Yes. Like we never noticed how many of them were like racially biased until they called themselves out on it, or until like something as dumb as a tweet goes viral that causes people to make an uproar about it.
Have words ever made you feel bad, Alondra? Has there been a title or a category or something you've seen that has made you feel, well, that's not how I am, or that's not how it is?
Mostly when I was studying back in high school U.S. history, there's a lot of, for example, the Redskins, the football league, that's not that's racist, basically, in how they, mock that they wear the traditional, the feathers and the hairdress, all of that. So, I mean, I see it here and there. But I think it's become kind of like a norm where I just kind of not expect it, but it's just so present everywhere. It's kind of like, oh yeah, it's present here, and it's kind of become a norm-ish in a way where I'm not surprised anymore that many of these things have a racist, biased.
Do you think it's a good time to change those things?
Definitely, yeah.
Because I know, and Councilwoman, I know that you're worried about how programs are named in your district, whether they're a positive or a negative based on what they're called.
Yeah, well, we have a number of youth programs, and I've been working very closely with youth and activists throughout the city on reforming how we deliver youth programming in the city of Los Angeles. We're the only large city in America that doesn't have a youth department, a department that is wholly so focused on youth engagement. But with respect to that, we also have youth programs that in one under the auspices of the police department, for example, there's a Jeopardy program which teaches youth how to do sports and has a variety of mentorship programming. But in Pacoima, it's called Jeopardy. In Northridge, it's PALS. And for me, I think it sends the wrong message about who our kids are that they're servicing in these neighborhoods. I think we need to be very thoughtful and mindful about how we project youth, and I've been very candid about it. My junior high school years weren't the best of my academic career. I got myself into trouble, probably just like a lot of others did in their adolescence. But if you become targeted, and I don't want to say targeted, but if you become labeled a certain way at that point, what does that mean for your trajectory? And I think it's really important that we understand that we have the responsibility to nurture and support our youth to their highest and best potential. And the way you do that is that, words matter. How you refer and how you treat them and how you deem them it matters. And I think no one is broken, so broken that they can't be fixed, or whatever the circumstances are, that they can't be nurtured with the support and the resources to help fulfill their highest and greatest potential. And so I think, in that process of how we reevaluate and restructure youth programming in the city of Los Angeles, it's going to be a much more mindful process of doing just that.
Right.
Because right now we have historically, just as Alondra mentioned, you have historically things that have just been, what you grew up around, what was the norm. It's been normalized. And I think we have to change that. And
Right.
This is the moment that's presented to all of us to do just that.
Well, I know that we don't have an enormous amount of time left, but now you do have this opportunity. You have a direct connection with Councilwoman Rodriguez right now. So Alondra, if you could leave her with, please think about, even though you're not in her district, you are a voice of a young Angeleno. What do you want her to hear from you? And we'll go around and ask Bridget and Eduardo as well. What do you really think she should know about what's going on with the youth in Los Angeles?
Well, one of kind of like my question was, but this is like kind of, I guess, like a compliment that I really like what you did with banning, or it was you introduced a motion to ban the city from purchasing goods made from prison labor. So I guess just continuing advocating for people, trying to make the city more equitable and just. I thought that I was looking through your Instagram and I was like, it's so amazing. I haven't even heard, like, it's been like a thing I've seen on the internet, but not something that I've actually seen into law. And then the fact that you did that, I thought that was really amazing. So I would like if you could continue advocating for others.
Well, thank you for that. And I invite you to also advocate for its passage. It was a motion that I introduced. It's going to be heard through the council process. And, part of what, again, an opportunity for all Angelenos to participate in is when you see a motion that speaks to you and speaks to where you think we should be going as a city and moving towards as a city, advocate for that as well. There's also power in yes. There isn't just power in no, there's power in yes. And so when you see things that you think are aligned with your values that you think we should be as a city pursuing, I'd like to invite you to also be part of that advocacy and that legislative process. But thank you for that. I'm looking forward to helping make that, delivering that for when council recess has concluded.
And Bridget, what would you like to suggest or offer as a little bit of incentive?
Well, I think I have to give you props for even wanting to listen to youth, because for a really long time, I was told that social and political issues are for those that are older and wiser, and just even you wanting to hear us out, I think it's like a big stepping stone that a lot more politicians and council members should do. Yeah.
And Eduardo, what do you want the councilwoman to think about when she's making decisions in the future?
I think, for me, something that I'd want to stress is kind of like the mental health of young people in this time. As I consider myself to be an educator through teaching local classes and things like that. But, with the decision that LAUSD took in, moving to remote classes for the next semester, for the time being, it's going to take a huge toll on young people, on students and stuff. So just advocating for more counselors, telecounseling, things like that will help support them in their education and in life. You talked about getting to the root of the causes. And I believe that a lot of these things, a lot of problems, in quotations, start with a lack of education or a lack of resources in general. So by providing mental health counseling and things like that to students that may not otherwise have access to it, you're going to be able to have a much longer and lasting impact on these students.
All right.
Yeah.
What's the puppy's name?
That's Luna that you just heard.
Okay, excellent. And that's a wrap on this edition of Protest and Promise.